Welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the time travelers. Who are they? So I have a link down in the description below to the latest Haunted Road Media video, which came out last night, late last night. You know, still a little discombobulated here from the recent move, getting the new studio set up. You can kind of see we got a new background going on here a little bit. Forgot to light the candles. Oh, well, next time. And so a Monday night release of a video. It's a little bit different for us. It'll get back in sync here on Fridays here very soon, but there is an 11-minute video out there right now on time travelers. A lot of time traveler reports and sightings over the years in a number of different countries, and even possibly my own time overlap experience, for lack of a better term. We'll get into a lot of these here throughout this show. So I don't want to, rehash everything. We are going to get into several of those different stories here. I do encourage people to later on go check out that video, because I include a lot more footage in that, photos and information and what have you. We're going to get into like some different information, different concepts. We'll get into time travel theories and possible methods of time travel, if it is really possible here. Or are we already experiencing time travel and just don't even realize it? So these are things that, if you have any questions, by all means, throw them down in the chat. Quarantine Ghost, he or she, will go ahead and field those questions. I know you guys are still trying to figure out who Quarantine Ghost is, but you're going to remain in the dark for ever. In any case, okay, people are liking the bookshelf, liking the background. I appreciate that. I know I set up the bookshelf for the time traveler video, and it's like it actually does look really good, except I actually need to use it for story stuff and not just keep it on set. So I don't know what's going to happen here with that. But I'm glad you guys like the background. So we'll keep this set up for a little while, see how it goes. All right. So I will admit, and I'm going to throw out a non-sponsored plug here. This is my own doing. This is definitely inspired by Dark coming out on season 3, coming out on June 27th. So that's the day of the apocalypse. If you've been watching the show. Tom McNicholas notes that there are no blue lights. Yeah, I know. I actually had it here to set up, and I forgot to plug it in. But yes, totally inspired by the show Dark. It is easily become my favorite show currently. May even become favorite show of all time. I have a few that it would probably contends with, but I'm really enjoying it. It does explore a lot of these different time travel concepts. I mean, that is like the central focus of the show. Well, second to the character development that they do within it. So we'll touch back on that a little bit later, but I wanted to throw out there that, yeah, this is kind of why I'm going on a time travel kick here this week, and we'll probably carry that over into next week, because then the show will have, been out, So, so Robert Hanna is excited for the series finale of Dark. Debbie O actually wanted to start watching Dark. We'll definitely go watch it. Highly encourage it. Mike recommended. There you go. All right. So let's go ahead and get into some of these different time travelers, not in a fictional world, but in our world, and who they may actually be. What is this? Leslie Fear, you should promo all the Haunted Road Media books coming out at the end. Well, I've got all the Haunted Road Media books here. So we'll add Leslie's to that list once hers comes out August 4th. Peripheral. Check it out. There you go, Leslie. There's your plug. Vanessa's book is coming out here pretty soon, too, as is another one from Dan Norvell. So, in any case. So, let's take the first one. So, this one was covered in the video that came out last night, the Time Traveling Hipster. And you can kind of see him here with the shades with the side shields. A lot of people claim that the logo shirt looks silk screen and therefore would not be possible. And then he's holding a very small portable camera. So he does look completely out of place. So this was actually a bridge reopening in the early 40s. So definitely out of place, out of time for all the other people that are around. Or is he? So there's a lot of controversy about this photo because, yes, he does look absolutely out of place. So there are those skeptics of this photo that say, well, actually, the shirt that he's wearing looks, because this was in Canada, this was in British Columbia, the shirt looks a lot like a Montreal Maroons shirt. Now, the Montreal Maroons used to be a hockey team in the NHL way back in the day from the 20s into the 30s. So is it possible? Is he even a former player? I don't know. If that's possible. I mean, you can kind of see the M. Now, the type of shirt that he's wearing there when it comes to the Montreal Maroons, I've only ever seen one photo of it, and it's on if you look at Snopes.com, they're the ones that actually kind of bash this photo. They're the only ones that carry that photo. All the other photos of the Montreal Maroons are basically a white letter M on the red background. And Snopes is the only one carrying the other photo, so I don't know where they got it from or where they found it. So the other thing about this is the sunglasses with the side shields, they did exist at that time. They weren't readily available, so they were harder to come by. And then the portable camera, I mean, it's a really small camera for the time, but there were some small portable cameras that were available. Again, not readily available. They were hard to come by. So was this guy a time traveler, or was he just really kind of ahead of his time for style back in 1941 when it was? So it's hard to say. I mean, you could make a case for either. I guess if he is a time traveler, what in the world was he doing at this particular bridge reopening? Seems a little weird. But he seems really out of place here for this photo. These couple of features, I mean, this dude is rocking really rare stuff for the time. So Tom McNicholas says, looks like an early man in black. Yeah, he just needs the hat. And you know what's funny, Tom? Everybody else around him is wearing the hat. He would probably fit in if he was wearing the hat. But Sharon Lane, maybe he was French and very fashionable. Well, you are talking Canada. If he was from Montreal, if that is a Montreal Maroons shirt, then maybe he is French. Eva Geller, maybe he was wealthy at the forefront of fashion in the 1940s. Possibly. Robert Hanna says, Mike, do you notice a woman who looks like she's looking at him as well? So, okay, so the one with the, it looks like brown hair, she's a little bit shorter, kind of between a couple of guys there, to his, it would be his right, our left in the photo. Possibly. She kind of looks like she's trying to squeeze through a couple of these guys. Maybe she's going to him. Maybe she was with him, and I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. You're talking about an obscure photo. Now, when that was put out on the internet, what's interesting about this, it was a museum in Canada that actually published it, and it was readily available through some different Canadian museum networks, and it was just kind of a random find on the internet, and it was posted out there as, do you think this was a time traveler? And all of a sudden, the museum website started getting hit like crazy. It went viral. And so it is an actual authentic photo. So people have tried to say, maybe it's photoshopped, that he was placed in there, or somebody photoshopped the clothing on him and what have you, but it is actually an authentic photo. So it just leaves us to try to figure out who exactly or what exactly he is. Because you look at the over jacket, I mean, that's a little weird too. I'm not even sure what that is. It's fuzzy, it's that is different too. It's unlike anything anyone else is wearing at that time. It looks like it's some sort of possibly strange sweater. It's got like this huge, massive V-neck to it, but then it kind of pulls down his shoulders too. So it's very strange. Quarantine Ghost, he kind of looks like Johnny Enoch. He kind of does look like Johnny Enoch. That's a good call. So Johnny Enoch, our good friend who was on the Alaska Triangle with me, and we interviewed him on Edge of the Rabbit Hole a few months ago. Good call, QG. Johnny, maybe Johnny's a time traveler and we don't know it. He went back. Johnny's Canadian, so it makes sense. There he goes, Johnny Enoch. There you go, everybody. That solves the mystery of the time traveling hipsters, Johnny Enoch. Yeah, Eva, I don't know if that's a hoodie or some sort of sweat jacket. It looks very, very fuzzy, and you can kind of see like a bit of a collar where maybe it almost changes types of fabric there at the very top. It's very it's a very unusual setup. The whole thing. So Nick Moulet, there are suspicions that some modern folks are time travelers. And that's kind of what we're talking about here tonight, buddy. That there are possibly time travelers amongst us. And we'll get into some of those different ideas here as we go along, and, who exactly time travelers may be and how exactly we may be able to time travel. So we'll do it. So Robert Hannah, why isn't anyone else not looking at him as if he's out of place if this photo is authentic? Well, they're watching the bridge reopening. I mean, maybe when they were, all gathering here, maybe they did initially look at him, but they are looking at the bridge reopening. So, there's no doubting the authenticity of the photo. It is a legit photo. This came through a museum, and they were absolutely totally surprised when their website started getting nailed with all kinds of activity. They were just posting a collection of photos from history around the area, and somebody saw that photo, saw the guy, and went crazy with it. It got posted on a couple of different websites. Dig picked it up, and it just went crazy. So, all right. Yeah, and QG, a picture is just a quick snapshot of just 1 second. So, yeah, not even that. It's like a fraction of a second, and so who knows what was really going on at that time. So, Lena says it would be really weird going back in time with no one we know around. So, it's, you always hear those ideas of, if you met yourself. Well, people always say if you met yourself, you would, create, a rip of the fabric of time and everything would explode. I don't believe that. Or meeting your grandfather or, somebody There's a lot of different ideas, and Dark definitely gets deep into that, but we see it happen in other shows and movies as well, and everybody seems to deal with that idea a little differently. You never really see the idea of somebody going back in time and not interacting with themselves or somebody they know or family or whatever. So, and I like this. So Leslie Fear, I'm thinking there is no time, only the illusion of the time period you feel you're in. Well, then get me the hell out of 2020 now, because 2020 has been absolutely freaking crazy. I didn't sign up for this. No. But interesting idea. So let's get into a couple more here. So I think we've covered the hipster quite enough. So there's the Versailles Time Slip. So with these two, Eleanor Jourdain and Annie Moberly. So basically, they were walking through the gardens at Versailles. This was back in 1901, and all of a sudden, they started seeing people out of place. So people that were dressed in like 18th century garb. There was a guy there with smallpox. There was somebody that was, she was in a very elegant gown and she was drawing a sketch of Marie Antoinette. There was a plow there that was out of place, and when they inquired about the plow, for the gardens, for plowing up the gardens, the gardener said that there was no plow there at the gardens anymore. But during the reign of King Louis the 16th, there had been a plow that the gardeners of the time and date would use. So it's it's one of those moments where time seems to overlap. And this is just one example of the Versailles Time Slip. So I've heard of stories of this happening like in London or other historic cities, or even just in, not even like a cityscape like that, but just like in a old castle somewhere or an old house. And I may have even had one of these experiences myself. And when we get, and many of us may have, those that have seen ghosts and apparitions and what have you, this may explain what some of these ghosts and apparitions may be, or we talk about our residual haunts, that, we're seeing something play out in time, that it seems to be recorded. And it may be that we are just, for a moment, overlapping time. Or I've mentioned it before on here because it's in her book, House of Darkness, House of Light, Andrea Perron, where she talks about her and her mother walking into the dining room. There's a couple of gentlemen sitting at the table, and they look at them as if they're the ghosts. And they're like, well, you look at that. Basically, it's like an overlap of periods of time. So this is what these couple of women experienced in the garden there, or at least it seems like. And so other people, after hearing these reports, and this is kind of what happens, like even in, today's date, you hear a report of a haunting and you're like, I've had that experience too, but you just never talked about it because you're like, I don't want people to think I'm crazy. But it emboldens people to come forth and say, hey, I've had that experience too, or I saw this. And so other people start doing that at Versailles. And you can find, books and websites and what have you dedicated to just Versailles and the hauntings that are there. And so this is one of them. But, to the garden itself, there's another woman, a school teacher, that went through and, she had walked through, one of the gates there, and it was a gate that when she walked through, it was open, but 100 years before she had walked through it, it had been sealed. So how does she walk through a sealed gate? Somehow at the time that she approached it, that kind of slip in time, and she's able to walk through the gate. It is really, really interesting. So let's see what you guys got going down here in the chat. WOA agrees with me, over 2020. Yes, for sure. Could they be alternate realities? Possibly. You start getting into the possibility of multiple dimensions. And I do believe in interdimensional beings. I've talked before, I don't want to get deep into multiverse and stuff like that, because I don't believe in the idea of a multiverse, in that any decision that we make spawns off another universe. Not that. Parallel universes, possibly. So there was some recent studies down in Antarctica where they found particles moving in basically the opposite direction of what they were expected. So it kind of gives a little credence to the idea that there is a parallel universe along with us running in the opposite direction. So if you could imagine a universe in reverse time from us, that calls into a lot of different crazy questions. So, and if we are able to sometimes see that alternate universe running backwards, where would it be in time when we cross paths with it? So that might be why we see some of these different weird, crazy things sometimes. So Leslie Fear, when I listen to near-death experiences, they talk about time as we perceive it is only an illusion, that there really is no time. It's all happening past and present at once. So this is what I talk about with my stack time theory, that and really it's a play off of, and I didn't realize it when I started developing this like 10, 15 years ago, probably longer, that it's actually a play off of Einstein's idea of the space-time continuum. So we're talking about a concept that's been around for like 100 years. And so, yeah, the idea is that past, present, future all working at the same time. And basically, you're just take a location and you're just kind of stacking everything on top of it. And there are moments, for whatever reason, that a couple of these places in time may echo or overlap or what have you. And because it's all at the same place and it's part of the same stack, then you're able to see that. And that may be why we see, some of these apparitions or ghosts where they're not actually an apparition or a ghost. They're not like a, like a spirit as what we think of, somebody has died and they've lost their body and all that, that it's actually a person and we're seeing an image of that. So basically, when people talk about, I saw a woman in a Victorian dress, she looked at me and thought I was the ghost. So, okay, fine. You're seeing a moment of the past. But if she's looking at you in that exact moment and she thinks you're the ghost, guess what? She's looking into the future. But it's really all happening at the same time. So, yeah. So I do get into that in some of the different videos that we've talked about here about space and time. So on Beyond the Shadows, and I have a couple of older videos out there on Haunted Road Media that talk about it as well, which I'm going to update here pretty soon and get into those different concepts. So nice, Eva Geller. So if we played the Beatles records forwards in the reverse universe, will they've freaked out also? Nice. Well, if you play the Beatles records in backwards in the reverse universe, then Paul is alive. There we go. All right. So that's a Versailles Time Slip. Another one we covered here. So there are, of course, throughout all of these different reports and sightings, your hoaxes. And so this is kind of one of the more notable ones. It still gets proliferated around the internet as if it is true, and it's not. So basically the story goes is that this guy just appeared out of nowhere in the middle of Times Square and proceeded to get hit by a car, because basically he showed up out of nowhere. He's looking around like, oh my God, where am I? This all looks weird and strange, and then a car hits him because he wasn't watching where he was going. Dies on the spot. He's dressed in 1800s clothing. Now this is supposed to have happened in like 1950. So he's dressed in old-fashioned clothing. He's carrying coins of the time and different other artifacts, a livery stable receipt, all these different things. So and they find a business card on him that says Rudolph Fentz. So the authorities are supposed to have looked him up and discovered that Rudolph Fentz has been missing since 1876. It's not a true story, though. It's a piece of fiction that was published in Collier's. This is the article, or at least half of it, by Jack Finney, and some of the artwork that went along with it. The piece on Rudolph Fentz is actually on the continued page later on in the magazine. And so it does happen where there's a story or an article from like decades ago that people recall reading, and they forget somewhere along the way that it was actually a piece of fiction that they were reading, because they remember reading it in a magazine, so it must be true, right? Kind of like we read it on the internet, so it must be true, right? Yeah. So yeah, over time, it just started getting regurgitated as a true story. Well, some years back, as it was making the rounds on the internet, there are some researchers who dug into it and found that article and discovered that, oh, no, this story is actually false. It's actually just a cute little story that was found or was written in this journal. So this happens. We end up with all kinds of hoaxes, and especially in today's day and age, where plenty of YouTube videos out there where people claim to have had some sort of experience. You end up there are actually YouTubers out there that claim that they are time travelers, and they are from the future, and this is the way things are going to be in like the year 8000, and all this other stuff. So and they'll show like blurry photos of some city at that time, and they're like, well, the time travel process blurs the photo. I don't know why it doesn't blur their face or their clothing or what, but it blurs the photo. So you see a lot of this on the internet, and I take it with a grain of salt. You see some story out there about time travel, or that sounds a little, off. Just do some research. Find out if it's legit. The Rudolph Fentz one there obviously was from a journal it was basically the following year, 1951, and he had wrote it about the previous year, 1950. So you get a lot of that. All right. So that's Rudolph Fentz and hoaxes, and beware for the hoaxes, because there are many out there. So this was kind of funny for me. So this is Air Marshal Sir Robert Victor Goddard. So he was knighted. He is a sir from the Royal Air Force in the UK. When I did the research for this one, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would actually find a photo of an airfield with cows. But there it is. So his story is basically that he took off from Edinburgh in Scotland, and he was flying down to Andover. He was flying over Drim, which was an abandoned airfield at the time. The cows were out there grazing all over the grounds. He remarked that some of them were actually out there on the tarmac, and there were cracks in the cement, and they're eating the grass that's grown up out of the cement. It's kind of detailed. So he flies over it, and like all the hangars are, disheveled and breaking down and all this. Flies over it, gets caught up in a storm all of a sudden. Just a storm whips up, and his plane's getting out of control, starts spiraling, all this other stuff. He's finally able to get control of it. And when he does, and he pulls out of this spin, straightens himself out, he's flying over Drem again. And all of a sudden, the skies open up, and there's bright sunshine and all of this. And the scene totally changes on him. So instead of the cows, there's now a wonderful cleaned up airfield. There are airplanes out there. There's 3 biplanes that they use for training. They're painted yellow. There's also a monoplane that's there, so it's a one wing across, and the mechanics there are dressed in blue. So it's a very unusual setup here, and the reason why that is because, well, one, the type of monoplane that he saw down there, they didn't start using for another 4 years. They didn't start painting yellow, the planes yellow, until that time as well. And it was a few years down the road when the mechanics started dressing in blue. So he was basically seeing a vision of this place 4 years down the road. Now, this is a guy that was, a very respected air marshal. Like I said, he was knighted. He's won medals. But yet he's had this experience. So again, it's one eyewitness's account. Do you trust the eyewitness? And this is something that we come across, of course, in the paranormal. So there's a lot of times where I'm getting up here on camera, or I'm in the middle of a paranormal investigation, and I'm on camera, and I've had a personal experience, or it may have even happened off camera. Tom McNicholas is down in the chat, and we could talk about the apparition of the little girl. It's something that did not happen on camera. It's a personal experience, so we tell the tale. Because I don't have that on camera, I don't have the footage, none of that, it's, do you trust the person that's telling you the story? Well, here's a knighted air marshal. Do I trust his story? I would like to. I didn't know him personally, so I couldn't tell you if he was a jokester or not, but from all that you read about his background, he sounds pretty credible. So a lot of times it comes down to, do we trust the person that is telling us the story? So this is again, another type of time overlap story, because he continued on his flight, and that was the only place that was out of time. So did he go back for a moment? Did he just have a flash of, just a vision of this place? Was it like a overlap thing? It's kind of interesting. So what is this about aliens you guys have going on down here? We're not even getting on to aliens today. Okay, fine. I'm not saying aliens caused the time travel, but it's aliens. There we go. So Leslie Fear, I think when we sleep, it's possible we travel to different places, hence where deja vu happens. It's off topic. We won't go down that road tonight, but we'll cover more on dreams. I've talked about dreams in the past, but I mean, when you dream, you do have the chance of astral projecting. So if you project to another location, have an experience there, well, that could certainly happen. You could be having a premonition while you dream. I've had plenty of premonitions. So yeah, some of these different things that we experience while we dream can actually be legit, and then we end up going to that place later on, be like, hey, I've been here before. So, maybe it was premonition in a dream, maybe you astral projected. There's a lot of different things. So, not necessarily pertinent to this, other than I guess you're wondering if you can time travel while you sleep. I mean, that could be part of the astral projection, perhaps. But again, if everything is happening concurrently, is it really traveling? So it's a good question. All right. So that is, whoops, wrong button. There we go. All right. So talking about pilots, real quick, Bruce Gernon. So this is actually a clip from the Alaska Triangle. They brought in Bruce's story because his story was about the Bermuda Triangle, but it was pertinent to a number of things that were going on there in Alaska with the portals and vortices and what have you. But Bruce's story is basically that his was a type of time travel in which he lost time. And you hear this a lot. Okay, fine. You guys brought up aliens there a little bit ago. You do hear this a lot with like alien abduction stories where they were abducted by the aliens, or maybe they just saw a flash of light or whatever, and suddenly they lost hours of time. Or with Bruce's story, it was a half an hour, or it could even be days. Suddenly they're down the road, and they shouldn't be down that further down the road, or they're still in a spot that they've stayed for the last 5 hours and shouldn't have. So you hear about these experiences with lapses of time like this. And so with Bruce, basically, he was going from Andros Island to Fort Lauderdale, a flight that he makes all the time. And as he was flying, these clouds formed up and created this spiral that he ended up flying through. His gauges and everything were going crazy. When he came out on the other side, Miami was below him, and it shouldn't have. He lost 30 minutes there. He basically went 100 miles in like 3 minutes. It was pretty crazy. So here's the I guess a little illustration of him going through the time tunnel or time vortex or time portal or whatever you want to call it in the Bermuda Triangle. So, of course, there are a lot of different Bermuda Triangle stories of ships and planes being lost. And the question is here with Bruce, did he experience what others have experienced and was lucky enough to survive? There's also the idea that many of those who have gone through portals like this ended up in another place and time altogether. Now, he only went 30 minutes ahead, ended up there near Miami, where it's kind of speculated that others may have gone to a completely different time, may have gone to another dimension. We talk about this with the missing Douglas airplane up in the Alaska Triangle, that after the plane disappeared, that there were some radio transmissions that could be heard, and perhaps the sound came back through the portal, since sound is on a different wavelength, but they ended up in another place in time. Maybe they went ahead in time. Maybe they even went backwards. We don't know. But it's possible that, who knows? Maybe we'll see that plane again, 20 years from now. All of a sudden it'll, pop out, from its, I guess, interdimensional travel, for lack of a better term, from that portal that was created, from the vortex of all the energy there. So Bermuda Triangle is one of these places in around the globe that this happens, and Bruce was fortunate enough to survive to tell the tale. So Robert Hanna right there, Mike, do you think Bruce's experience is what caused a lot of the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle? I think what Bruce experienced was what many of those in the Bermuda Triangle had experienced, and he was fortunate enough to survive. How he did, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't strong enough yet. Maybe it was, bubbling up, because it seems like he hit it right when it started. So maybe it just hadn't gained enough force yet to be able to do something more significant, and it got him, 30 minutes ahead of time. Perhaps if he had caught that a little bit later, or when it was a bit stronger, maybe it would have shot him forward, years ahead of time. It's really hard to know, because we don't know, where these other planes and ships and everything are. So, some of them still could have simply been, got mixed up into this, because remember, all of his instruments and gauges are going haywire. Still could have been that was happening to those airplanes as well, or those ships, and instead of shooting them in time, perhaps it just created enough damage on the craft that it crashed into the ocean. So some of them could have been on the verge of going through one of these portals. The plane ended up too damaged, and they just unfortunately perished in the ocean. So I know we like to think that all these guys were just kind of shot through these portals and time travel tunnels and ended up in another dimension somewhere, and those things very possibly could have started happening. And unfortunately, I do believe some of them did perish and are just there at the bottom of the ocean, and we just don't know where. So, the unfortunate thing is that we've never, with many of these, we've never seen the wreckage. Some of them they do end up finding some wreckage, or something washes up later on, or they might actually find something in the ocean floor. But many of them, we have no idea. Nothing at all has ever surfaced. So, all right. Sharon Lane says, flying in and out of the Bahamas can feel like you're in another world because of the unbelievable cloud formations. Yeah, it's definitely a different place on Earth down there. And I think that's what kind of happens. Like, Alaska is a very different place on Earth. And so I think those type of qualities play into these different forces that are there. So you have the electromagnetic qualities that are there from the Earth, basically the vortex that's coming up out of the Earth's core in those locations. There's a lot of things, at these, I guess I'm using the word locations again, that help to enhance that energy that's there. So like with the Bermuda Triangle, definitely the water, the Alaska Triangle. You have the volatility of the land that plays into it, the volcanic activity, the structure of just like the qualities of the stone that's there and things like this. So you get a lot of that play in there that create these different triangle areas. Leslie Fear. So if all the other ships, people, planes disappeared, never to be found again, maybe they went to another time and they're the ones who appear in all those crazy time travel pics. Well, I mean, that's what a lot of people, I guess, kind of hope for, that they've made it, through this thing alive and they're in another time and place and all that. We don't know. I do believe some of them perish and they're there under the water somewhere, at least for the Bermuda Triangle. But could others have made it out on the other side? Maybe. I don't think the guy in the Time Traveling Hipster photo was a survivor of the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, you're just Bermuda, British Columbia, they're kind of far apart, and it seems weird to me. I guess with the Time Traveling Hipster photo, it seems weird to me. What in the world would a time traveler be doing at the South Forks Bridge reopening? It seems really, really random. I'm not discounting that it's a time traveler. It could be. It could be one of the survivors from the Bermuda Triangle. I don't know, but it could be somebody from somewhere else. Could be Johnny Enoch. There you go. Quarantine Ghost. Ask Johnny Enoch. That's right. All right. So that's Bruce Gernon's Bermuda Triangle. So now get into a little bit about the interesting thing, like the ghosts, the apparitions. This is the vagabond on the roadside that's seen along Route 66 in some parts, specifically Fort Reno and Weatherford, Oklahoma, that area. Could he be caught in some sort of time tunnel if he shows up on the road? Some people say they're even able to pick him up. Sometimes he'll jump out on the road, but basically, the big thing is that he'll be seen on the road. You might pass him. A couple miles down the road, you see him again. So is he time jumping ahead somehow? It's really strange. Is there an overlap? Maybe you're seeing him at one point during his travel, and then you're seeing him again further down the road at another time during that walk. It's we're not sure. There could be some sort of time overlap, time lapse there. That's my son Chase in the photo, by the way. I had him play the part of the vagabond for the Fort Reno Ghosts and Legends video. Like, oh my gosh, it was like 9 years ago, something like that. So, but you hear a lot of stories also about like the disappearing diners. I did not cover this in that video from last night. So, but you hear, is Papa Bear down there? So Papa Bear's told the story before about he had it on I think it was a comment in one of the videos on the Hunter Road Media channel where he had pulled off on the side of the road at a diner, actually ate at the diner. And then woke up the next day and it disappeared. I think I'm 99% sure he said he ate at the diner. If not, he parked there and it was gone the next morning. So, but that's not the only time I've heard a story like that where, there's a diner on the side of the road and people stop there and then the next day it's gone, or several hours later it's gone, or they pass through the area again like a couple days later and the diner is gone. So this seems to be like another Route 66 thing, like, but it's, I guess, not specific to Route 66. It does happen like around the country, but I've heard that one on Route 66 before. Like the vagabond, these disappearing entities, buildings, cars are another one. So people report ghost cars, but is it really a ghost, or is it just we're temporarily overlapping with another place in space and time, and we're seeing a moment from that. For something like the diner, it's a little bit more significant because people have reported actually eating there before, at some of these, or they park there for a time just to rest, or they pass by it and there it is. I mean, that might be just a few seconds, but some of these are actually significant amounts of time that they're actually able to be seen and witnessed. So it's really, really interesting. Sharon Lane, those diner stories are freaky. Yeah, they really are. They're really, really interesting because they're more so than just your standard residual haunt where you see like an apparition walk into a wall. This is an actual physical location. Like I said, if some people are actually eating there, I mean, where are you getting the meal from? So it is like you have. It's very Twilight Zone-ish, right? It's like you've gone back in time. You've stepped through that portal yourself and have eaten at this location. So somebody served you, and maybe you did go back to, 1953 or whatever, and you actually ate at that diner and you got back in your car and now you're back in 2020. So you may be the time traveler. So I do want to get back into that here in a few minutes here. So, Robert Hand, the disappearing house at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. People do talk about the disappearing house there. So is that caught in some sort of space-time continuum where that house is appearing and reappearing and disappearing? So, definitely Twilight Zone-ish. So, since we are getting into the idea of the disappearing diners and the vagabonds, so my possible time overlap experience, it's a shadow person story that I talk about all the time. Many of you have heard this story. Johnny V's, and it's a shadow person story, so that's why you guys have heard so much about it. And basically, what happens here is doing the last photo sweep of the diner. There's people up in the bar area, others out in the restaurant area. I'm going through the main kitchen doors, and as I go through those doors, this is the side door. And there was a real quick, very translucent shadow that darted across the room as I walked into the kitchen and slammed into this door. But the door didn't move. You just heard the bam, the slam of that door. So I call out to everybody else, hey, did you guys hear that? Yeah, we heard that. And I thought they were messing with me for a little bit. Like maybe they threw something at the door or whatever. Now this door, you could just like barely, you could just tap it, like just barely, and the thing would open. It was meant for waiters and waitresses carrying large trays of food to walk through and take the food out to the dining room. Now, I walked through the door because I'm investigating. There's nothing on the floor. Nobody was messing with me. They were way the heck out in the front of the dining room area. The guys were still up there in the bar area. They're not messing with me. They were all doing their own things. So what in the world happened here? So the theory, and it could be a time thing. This is my theory for, interdimensional beings. Okay. It does work for time as well. So if our two dimensions are overlapping, so the shadow person sees me basically as the ghost. I see the shadow person as the ghost, for lack of a better term. I mean, maybe it saw me as a shadow. I'm definitely seeing it as a shadow. And perhaps in its plane of existence, it blasts through that door and right out into the dining room. The door opens physically. On mine, because the shadow is not a physical entity on my plane of existence, it can't open the door, but it does on its. And the reason why I hear the sound is because sound is on a different wavelength, so it's able to traverse the two dimensions. You could say this, maybe these are two moments in time. Perhaps, if it isn't, because remember, the interdimensional stuff is a theory of mine. If it's not a quote-unquote interdimensional thing, and it's more of a time thing, that we have two moments of time that are echoing, overlapping, whatever at that moment, and I'm actually seeing like a person, another moment in that building's history, and perhaps it's seeing also another moment in the building's history. Just kind of vaguely, right? Because I'm just seeing a shadow. And so it freaks out. It's scared of me because I'm a shadow or a ghost walking into the room, and it blasts right through that door. And so perhaps it was something that happened in the future or something in the past, maybe a few years beforehand that I'm interacting with. And this person blasts through there at another point in time. It could be. That could actually be a time lapse. Now, would we call that, would that still be a crossing of dimensions? I mean, are these two terms essentially kind of the same? This overlap in time travel, interdimensional travel, are they really part of the actually the same concept? At least they're very closely related. They would certainly have to be. So, all right. So that is that part. So spent a lot of time on all that, and it says we got like 10 minutes left on the show. So I guess we're going a few minutes longer because I do want to get into, for a few minutes here, how do we time travel, right? Because I have to say, I think there's something inherent within humans, for many of us at least, that believe that there is some sort of time travel, that it is possible. We see this play out so much in our popular culture, in our books, our movies, our TV. This is something that it seems like humans want to have happen. Maybe it's something that earlier civilizations, because we talk about lost civilizations, the earlier civilizations were able to do, and we've lost that ability over time. Yeah, over time. If time exists, right? It's at least something within us that we really want to make happen. So we come out with all these fantastic ideas of how to make that possible. How can we re-achieve the idea of traveling in time? Well, anybody who grew up in the 80s knows that the flux capacitor is what makes time travel possible. There's Marty McFly in the DeLorean with the flux capacitor. Right? That's what makes time travel possible. The flux capacitor. Well, that's one idea. Very famous idea, of course, from the movie Back to the Future. And we tend to do this. We always tend to give it some sort of device, right? So I talked about Dark earlier that I'd come back around to. So Dark has their time machine, right? It's a time machine. It's straight up. Now, Dark has like 5 different versions of, probably even more, of a time machine or time travel. And I'm not going to give like any spoilers here. I mean, this is basic to the show. The show is about time travel. So, they have their the big blob of stuff. Basically, there's many of the characters in the show dubbed that the God particle. There's the door in the caves, under the area in question that you're able to walk through, and you go through a passage in time. And they've done it like every 33 years is the way they've done that show. That you can go, there's the present, 33 years in the past, 33 years in the future. And there's a lot of reasons as to why they get into that in that show. I'm not going to dive into all of that here. So it's really, really interesting, all the different concepts and theories that they've incorporated into that show. So I definitely highly recommend it. But we as humans always seem to be trying to use like some sort of device when we come up with this idea. It has to be a device. The flux capacitor in the DeLorean uses plutonium. The time machine in Dark uses cesium-137 or whatever the heck it is. It's always some sort of device, and we have to, make it nuclear or, use some sort of substance or whatever, because we can't seem to explain plainly as human beings a legitimate way to be able to time travel. And some of you hit it on it earlier of, it was Leslie, right? The, when you're sleeping, you're dreaming. Are you possibly time traveling when you're dreaming? If you're like astral projecting somewhere or, having a premonition, is that almost like a type of time traveling? Possibly. And I believe that when we get down to a real way that humans can travel in time, it's less about all the machinery of it. I think ancient civilizations they had a better idea of how to utilize our own abilities as humans in harnessing the Earth's energy to be able to do many, many different things. That's why, we have these ancient sites of power like Stonehenge and the pyramids and all this. I'm not saying necessarily that they're time travel machines, but we understood how to use energy in our own bodies better. There are many, many things that we lost to time. And things that we were able to do, like move the huge different blocks. How were we able to do that? We can't even do it now, with the machinery that we have. Like, we're just on the cusp of being able to do some of these things. And it's like, wait a minute, we were doing it with less advanced tools, thousands and thousands of years ago. It doesn't make sense, but somehow we knew how to do it. So I think the same could be true of time travel, in that our minds today, our society today, our culture over the last few thousand years has just gone extremely, extremely mechanical. And so when we come up with these concepts and ideas in pop culture, that we go very mechanical with it. Hence the DeLorean and the plutonium, and dark with the 10 different ways you can time travel in it. So I think if we really can travel in time, whether you believe in the stacked time theory or not, like I said, we'll get into more of that in another video. Probably on the Haunted Road Media channel later. Although you can find some older videos on that there, or even some older Beyond the Shadows videos on it. I think it's going to be more like, I think there is one movie that really, really hit on it very well. And if there is a way, this would be the way to do it. And that's Somewhere in Time. How many of you remember this movie? I know it's very like un-sci-fi-y, although it has all the time travel stuff in it because it's a love story. But basically, and I am going to spoil this because, my God, the movie's 40 years old. So if you haven't seen it by now, I'm sorry. But basically, he wills himself into the past. Christopher Reeve. He is from, I guess it would be the 1970s, right? And the movie came out in 80, but it was filmed in the 70s. So modern day for them would be the 1970s. He wills himself back like 60 some odd years so that he can be with the woman. He just gets enamored with her photo. He's a playwright and he's out of ideas. And so he goes to the Grand Hotel, Mackinac Island, sees her photograph there, falls in love, and he wants to see her. Of course, he was actually visited by her as an old lady a few years beforehand. So what he ends up doing, he researches her, finds out where she had been living before she passed. She had this book from his old college professor about traveling in time. And so the idea for this concept of time travel, that he ends up visiting the professor and talks to him about, his brief moment with time travel, is basically willing yourself into that place in time. So what Christopher Reeve ends up doing is, getting the clothing of the time, putting things in his room from that era, and basically putting himself into the mindset that he actually is in that place in time. So he gets a room at the hotel, sets it all up as best as he can to be in that decade, and eventually puts himself there. So it's all a power of the mind. All, human energy, all himself to get there. Nothing mechanical whatsoever to go back in time. It's all human. And I think that is, if we're really going to time travel, all we really need to do. There's something in our, I guess, on our culture these days that tells us that we can't do it without, machinery, that we can't do it without, some nuts and bolts and all that, that it has to be, and I love the sci-fi movies. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Jesus, I'm a big sci-fi nut. But I think there's something about it that tells us that we have to use a machine, but I don't think we have to. If we're able to astral project, to be able to come out of our bodies and go to another place altogether, why can't we do that with time as well? So we talked earlier, again, dream state, astral projecting, premonitions, all that. Yeah, why can't we also take that state of being, go into some sort of deep meditation like he did, convinced himself he was in that place and time, and actually go back and experience it? And if it is all, if you're taking the space-time continuum or stacked time theory or whatever the hell you want to call it, and everything is there, concurrently at the same time anyway, then it's just a matter of taking your consciousness and taking it from, one place up here to one place down here. That's all it is. It's just switching from one place to another. Maybe it's a vibratory level. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. It would take a lot of, I guess it would take some figuring out exactly what that is. But could you travel in time just by the power of your mind? I think you could. I think that that somewhere in time was actually really onto something there, but gets overlooked. So, all right. So what did you guys have down here in the chat that I missed while I was kind of monologuing there? Lake House, yeah, that's an interesting one. No, I haven't seen Outlander yet. Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Well, it was more of he was aging in reverse, not so much time travel. All right, yeah, Jane Seymour, Christopher Reeve. Yeah, it's really like one of my all-time favorite movies. So, yeah, if you had to ask me what my favorite romance movie is, that would be it. I do like romance. You mentioned Lake House. Lake House is another. If you were to say a romance movie that I like, it would be that. It has to have a quirk in it, right? So, yeah, Somewhere in Time would be my favorite romance, but it has a lot to do with the time travel. But Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour were fantastic in that. Dark also asked the question, what came before, which is interesting. And that's kind of the thing. So when we get more into, and I'll bring it up here, I'm gonna do it. You guys know it's coming because we've been talking a lot about this lately, the connected universe. Yes, Dark does talk about this. In fact, it's very, very heavy-handed in it. It flat out says everything is connected. I mean, that's in the tagline of the show, everything's connected. Every episode, they're talking about everything's connected. And they also hit you over the head with, the end is the beginning and the beginning is the end. Everything is basically cyclical. And so, so there's a concept of the oscillatory universe, and I know that there are detractors to it, but you get into, and Dark goes into it, the Big Bang, the Big Crunch, and the Big Crunch is basically the universe, the end of the universe. Does that just create another Big Bang? And we keep going around and around and around. And they talk about the snake eating its own tail. And they have the Ouroboros imagery within Dark as well. So that ring that's in the caves that the string is tied to, that's an Ouroboros, that's the snake eating its own tail. The movie Predestination, that's another fantastic time travel movie. Predestination, that also uses a device, right? It looks like a violin case, but it's actually a time travel machine. But that also the snake eating its own tail. So you get a lot of this different imagery. of everything being connected. And it does make a lot of sense to me, because you think, okay, if we as like physical entities, everything around us is stardust. It's all matter from the universe, and it's come together here now for a certain period of time. Our sun will eventually become a red giant, destroy the earth, explode, all of that stuff, become a white dwarf. This will not always be here. It's going to go through its cycle of the universe. The matter will explode elsewhere. In fact, one of the ideas is that this is not the first time that we have been a solar system, that our sun basically got spat out of another solar system when it exploded. And so this is the matter from that this is basically like our second go around of just a solar system. We're not even talking about the universe. So it takes many, 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 many years, but universe eventually ends and then explodes again, and we go through it all again in another cycle. Matter forming, all the stuff, all these particles, all these gases forming up, creating the stars, the galaxies, the universe, or the solar systems, all that stuff, the planets. We play it again and again and again. So which came first, right? The chicken or the egg? Well, everybody thinks that the egg is the way that a chicken creates another chicken. It's just which came first, right? The chicken or the egg? Another way to look at that, why does it always have to be that the egg is the way a chicken makes another chicken? Why can't the chicken be the way an egg makes another egg? Right? All right. So one last time through your comments and questions. So Outlander starts out in Scotland, Clan Grant, which I am also Clan Grant. Thank you, Sharon. And all right, so let's go ahead and wrap it up and get to the shout-outs. Eva thinks I got a little too deep there. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. We go deep here. It's beyond the shadows. So we go beyond all of that stuff. So thank you, Quarantine Ghost, for moderating the chat. Absolutely appreciate that. Let's go ahead and get down to the Patreon patrons. Tom McNicholas, B3 Airspace, Pamela Queen, Joe Chandler, Andrew Cox, Dustin Samario, and David Yeisley. You are all deep down the rabbit hole Patreon patrons. Of course, we have more Patreon patrons other than that. These are deep down the rabbit hole ones. You can check out everything going on at the Patreon page, patreon.com/hauntedroadmedia. All right, so let's get to the participants tab here. Also, thank you for joining us tonight. That's a new name. Always great to see new names out here. Andrew is Trucking Gnomes. That's Andrew Cox. Great to see you. Kathy Salento, thank you as well. There's Christopher Stanton. Always a pleasure. Alina the Fam, thank you very much. Eva Gellert, thanks for joining us. Grand Old Folks, that's Betty Lange. Thank you as well. And thank you for all the questions, guys. Really appreciate it. Helen Espinoza, thank you very much. Nick Moulet, great to see you. Robert Hanna, thank you as well. Sharon Lane, as always. Tom McNicholas. Tim Schoen. This episode of Beyond the Shadows brought to you by Haunted Road Roast. It helps you hunt ghosts. There you go, buddy. Now that I had a place to actually put the coffee. All right. Tracy Christian and Victoria Monday. Leslie Fear was down there, had a bunch of questions. I really appreciate that as well. I don't know why she's not showing up in the participants tab. Guha was in here, I think, between shows. So shout out to Guha. And, of course, Diane Hilbert. Much love and positive energy out to her with her surgery tomorrow. So hope that all goes well. Mr. CO2, could you go back so far back in time before your birth and be consciously aware? Yeah, I absolutely believe that. I don't think going back, almost 46 years would be that big of a deal. The question is, how much do you want to screw with the past that you ruin your future? I mean, that's always the question, right? If you change the past, how would it affect the future? What's interesting about the show Dark is they get into the concept of how the future influences the past. It is really, really interesting. So they get a lot into bootstrap paradoxes there. So there might be, like the movie Somewhere in Time, the bootstrap paradox is the pocket watch. You really don't know where the origin of it is because it just gets passed around and passed around and passed around throughout time. Dark has like, half the objects in the show are a bootstrap paradox. It's crazy. So, all right, everybody. I think that wraps it up for tonight. Everybody have a great week, and we will see you back here next Tuesday. Take care, everyone. Until next time.